Hey, for those of you returning, welcome back. And for those of you that are new here to the channel, then welcome and thank you for joining me. Here is my review of Flight Risk, an action thriller directed by Mel Gibson and written by a Jared Rosenberg. And I've been really looking forward to this movie, you know, just from the synopsis and sort of the glimpse that we get of the movie from within the trailers. It has that kind of very 90s action B-movie vibe about it. And, you know, that is something, you know, these are the type of movies that I grew up with loving, like Cliffhanger, Con Air, Air Force One, all of those kind of movies. And so I was hoping to really have an experience with this film that would take me back to those films, to those experiences from the 80s and the 90s. And, you know, this is a film that I feel like is clearly a homage and it's inspired by those kind of movies. They're fun, they're mindless, you can turn your brain off for a couple of hours and just have a really good time. So, Flight Risk. The film follows a pilot transporting a US Marshal and a government witness across the Alaskan wilderness, where the identities and intentions of those on board come into question. So yeah, just like I said, you know, when it comes to the synopsis, what this movie is about, the story, you know, it's clearly inspired by those silly, over-the-top, cheesy action B-movies from the 90s, the 80s. It's clearly that is what they were aiming for with this movie. Unfortunately, for me personally, it fails to really capture sort of the magic of those movies, that kind of what made those movies special. The intentions are there, but it just really kind of fails to capture sort of the charm and character and the essence of those movies. The opening scene within this movie, where it establishes our two main characters, Topher Grace as this informant and Michelle Dockery as this US Marshal. It's a scene that also establishes the movie's tone, and it just threw me out. It took me by surprise. Because, you know, don't get me wrong, these movies in which this film is clearly inspired by, those movies from the 80s and 90s, you know, they are movies that came with tongues in cheek. Do you know what I mean? They had a sense of humour. They had a certain sort of, you know, level of humour running throughout them. But yeah, it's very kind of misjudged. And it was just a little bit too over the top. I think they really needed to dial the humour back a hell of a lot. It was sort of very silly and very kind of cartoon-like, and in moments it kind of reminded me a little bit of Marvel humour. And so yeah, the humour that's running throughout this movie really just didn't work for me. And as the movie progresses and evolves, even though they establish that tone within sort of the opening moments of this film, it ends up feeling very uneven as the movie progresses, due to what is involved or due to sort of the drama really within the film. And it just kind of, as a result, this whole entire experience suffers because I felt of sort of that element to the story, the humour that is injected within this story. You know, like I said, you know, the movies in which this film, the story is clearly inspired by, they all came with their tongues firmly in cheek. Do you know what I mean? They all had a sense of humour that it worked. It was never sort of over the top. Like, what the fuck is with that moose? One of the sort of one of the only aspects of this movie that really stayed with me after the credits roll was, like, what the fuck was with that moose at the beginning of the movie? I get sort of what they were attempting to do with it in regards to the humour, but it was like, I just really wasn't expecting it, to be honest with you, and it did nothing to sort of really get me on board. So once we finally get on the plane and we are introduced to the hitman, played by Mark Wahlberg, things do start to look up. And there are some good moments dotted throughout this film, but a lot of that is aided or elevated by Mark Wahlberg as this character, this hitman, this pilot. I really dug how he was bringing this villain to life. He was clearly enjoying himself, and it was sort of the only aspect of this movie really that I found myself really kind of gravitating towards because of how he's bringing his characters to the life. Like, there's this one moment, and it's sort of briefly in the trailers, where he gets shot by this flare gun, and he just sort of comes out of the smoke, and just the way in which he's bringing the character to life within these moments like that, and it could be other moments where he's sort of just eyeing up this US Marshal and all of that. He just does a really good job at bringing a very sleazy, creepy character to life. And it's very much Mark Wahlberg, even though it's inspired, again, by villains from those movies, like, you know, from the 90s and the 80s. It was very much Mark Wahlberg and his performance, and I just really, really dug how he brought the character to life. It was probably one of the only real positives for me when it comes to this experience. One of my major issues with this movie was it was just unable to really build and maintain a momentum. It never really feels like it truly goes anywhere, and then before you know it, we are already on the runway, and it teases you with one last moment of fun, but ends abruptly, like a fart in the wind. Like, it almost felt like they'd run out of money or just wasn't sure how to end the movie, and that's how it felt. Like, the film ends that in a way that sort of took me back to Con Air a little bit. You know, one of my favourite action movies from the 90s. Silly, cheesy, over the top, but it's a film that has character, it has charm about it. And you get a moment in the final act, and you feel like, it almost like the film teases you it's going to go down that similar route like Con Air, where you think the film has ended, and then it's like, nope, here we go again. And it just sort of kind of like almost stinks the finger up at you and goes, no, that's it, ta-da. And it's like, oh.
Man up and vanished like a fart in the wind.
And it just sums up the overall experience. Like, the entire experience had no energy to it. Like, there wasn't once when I felt like, you know, I was on a very sort of adrenaline-fueled thrill ride. This wasn't fun. This wasn't a fun experience. There were moments and aspects about it that I kind of liked, and I could see where they could have gone with it, and this really could have been an adrenaline-fueled thrill ride. And so, you know, like, again, like The Wolfman in many ways, the ingredients are there, but it's just how everything is sort of executed and comes together, even down to the writing, the humour, and the performances. But I feel like the performances maybe are hindered by the writing, and so maybe the direction, I don't know. But even the performances came across very awkward, like they lacked the confidence, really. In a way, they somewhat lacked a confidence that would bring these characters to life in a way that felt real, that felt natural. Like Michelle Dockery, for example, as this US Marshal, she just felt miscast. But then at the same time, like, I absolutely loved her in Boy Kills World, and I know they kind of different roles. I'm not entirely sure if it was really the writing or the lack of direction, because between Michelle Dockery and Topher Grace, you know, there would be moments where it almost felt like they were sort of thinking to themselves, like, what the fuck am I doing here? What the fuck am I saying? What are we doing? What is this? That's kind of how it came across sometimes. You know, this is a screenplay. This is a story that just screams tension and suspense. An intense thrill ride in a very kind of contained environment. It's got so many possibilities, but it just lacks the energy and tension for the type of story that it is. You know, it's the type of story that screams tension and suspense and intense moments of adrenaline-fueled fun, but it's just non-existent due to how these moments are constructed through various elements of how the film is constructed, you know, from the humour to the writing, and just how the dialogue is delivered by its cast. Everything just somewhat felt disjointed and awkward in how everything came together and how everything was executed within the story. I did like the cinematography. when I'm really sort of trying to think what it is, out of the, like I said, the ideas are there. I like the ideas. They just don't come together. I do like the cinematography. But when it comes to a movie that's directed by Mel Gibson, this is a massive, massive departure in quality, in what you would really come to expect when it comes to a film directed by Mel Gibson. Like, when Mel Gibson comes up in the credits, rather abruptly, I must say,
man up and vanished like a fart in the wind.
It was like, am I in the Twilight Zone here? Because it really doesn't feel like a Mel Gibson film. And again, I go back to that moose. Perhaps I'm sort of dwelling too much on this moose. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I've read or seen anyone else bring this moose up. But I'm like, what the fuck was that about? And for a film that is, as focused and contained when it comes to what it's about with its story, it is an experience that lacks the excitement and the thrill of what would come with such a story. As I previously said, it is an experience that has its moments. It has moments, very brief, small moments of potential. But like with The Wolfman, the ideas are there, but they just don't come together to create a fun, thrilling, non-stop action movie that does take you back to those movies that it's clearly inspired by and paying homage to. It just doesn't really kind of get the humour that was within those movies. It's very misjudged, and it fails to truly bring to life the tension, suspense, and thrills within its concept and ideas. This could have been easily, a 1 hour, 30-minute movie of just turning your brain off and having a hell of a lot of fun. And there is light there, there is potential there. Like, one of the strongest aspects for me is Mark Wahlberg as this villain. I think he is great. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Flight Risk. A very big disappointment for me, because I was just looking forward to something that was, mindless, that I could just turn my brain off for a couple of hours and have a bit of fun, be reminded of those movies that I grew up with loving as a kid, as a youngster, on VHS, like Con Air and all of those. Yes, they were silly, over the top, they were cheesy, they were corny, they had this humour running through them, they had their tongues firmly in cheeks. But this film, even though it's inspired by those, and, in a way it's paying homage to a certain era of action B-movies, it's just very misjudged. It just fails to really truly capture what made those movies special. It lacks the charm, it lacks the character, and it just lacks sort of the intensity, really, of those movies. Yes, you could be silly, yes, you could be over the top, but this Flight Risk was just incredibly disjointed. It was incredibly awkward in how it all came together. It somehow Mel Gibson just struggled here to really sort of inject a momentum and an energy into this overall experience. But just because I feel like this with Flight Risk doesn't mean everyone is going to. There are people that are going to really enjoy it and have a hell of a good time. I know there have been people who have liked this movie a hell of a lot, because it is what it is. I don't really want to use fun, because for me personally it wasn't, but it's meant to be mindless fun. But for me it just really, really didn't work, and it was a disappointment. And yeah, that moose in the window. Yeah. I mean, I'm all up for having the kind of generic, sort of formulaic setups when it comes to our characters within these movies. I mean, they all had it. But this one, at the beginning, with our informant, played by Topher Grace in that lodge, just that entire scene was very bizarre. So yeah, enough rambling on from me. They are my thoughts on Flight Risk, and I will be giving Flight Risk So yeah, they are my thoughts on Flight Risk, but what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. My next movie review is going to be another surprise because there's a Scream Unseen on Monday. So for those of you that don't know, we're not from the UK, I'm not sure, I think they do the same thing over in the States, but it might be called something different. We get Screen Unseens and Scream Unseens, and the Scream Unseens are horror movies that are about to be released within the next week or two. But we don't know until the movie starts. But I am sort of keeping my fingers crossed that it's going to be Companion. I'm hoping it's Companion, but I don't know. So at the moment, I can't tell you what my next movie review is going to be until Tuesday, probably the latest, when I get the review up. And I do have a very late review on the way for season 1 of Skeleton Crew, the latest Star Wars Disney TV show. If you've been following me for a while now, you know I've got a love-hate relationship when it comes to Star Wars on TV. It hasn't always worked for me, but when it does work, boy, don't it work. I mean, Andor is phenomenal. I absolutely love Andor. Love the first season of Mandalorian, but it's been very inconsistent. Yes, I mean, when it comes to Star Wars, Disney, that's a story. That's another video for another time, sometime, somewhere in the future. But yeah, I will have a review for the Skeleton Crew shortly. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of those new subscribers to the channel. Welcome. Thank you for joining me on this journey. It really means a lot. Let me know in the comments below, what video was it that got you, made you go, I want to subscribe to this Welsh guy that I can't understand and can barely pronounce anything. Let me know below in the comments. I just really do appreciate it. It will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek rambling on about film. And talking about rambling, that'll be enough from me for now. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.